Ambassador Kang Daeho walked slowly through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. His old leather briefcase felt heavier than usual today. After 30 years of serving humanity in this place, he knew every corner of the giant room. The high ceiling stretched up so far that clouds sometimes formed near the top. 47 different species had seats arranged in perfect circles around the center stage. Today felt different. The usual noise was missing. No one was arguing about trade routes or border disputes. The aliens sat quietly in their seats waiting. Some looked bored. Others checked their communication devices. A few seemed annoyed that they had to be here at all. Kang stepped up to the speaking platform in the center. The small microphone would carry his voice to every corner of the chamber. He had given thousands of speeches here. He had solved conflicts between species who wanted to kill each other. He had helped design trade agreements that made everyone rich. He had spent most of his adult life in this room. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Kang began. His voice was steady and calm. I stand before you today to deliver humanity's final report. Regent Vexitar, the tall crystal being who ran the council, barely looked up from his data pad. His body was made of living blue crystal that changed color with his mood. Right now, it was a dull gray that meant he was bored. The human delegation has served this council for 300 years, Kang continued. We have worked as engineers, diplomats, mediators, and peacekeepers across the galaxy. We have built your stations, fixed your ships, and helped solve your problems. Some of the aliens shifted in their seats. The Korthax delegation, who looked like giant insects, clicked their mandibles softly. The water-breathing Aquans bubbled in their tanks. But most of the council members seemed distracted. Dr. Park Soo-jin sat in the human observation area, watching everything carefully. She was a scientist who studied alien biology, but she had spent enough time around politics to understand what was really happening. The council saw humans as useful workers, nothing more. They never asked for human opinions on important matters. They just expected humans to fix things when they broke. During our time here, Kang said, humanity has maintained over 50,000 space stations. We have managed trade routes covering 12 spiral arms of the galaxy. Our diplomatic teams have prevented over 2,000 wars. Our engineers have designed safety systems that have saved millions of lives. Regent Vexitar finally looked up. Yes, Ambassador. Your people have been very helpful. We appreciate your service. Is there a point to this speech? Kang felt a cold anger rise in his chest, but his face stayed calm. The point, Regent, is that effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all Galactic Council activities. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the air system seemed to stop. Vexitar's crystal body flashed bright red, then settled into orange confusion. Withdrawing? Vexitar asked. What do you mean? I mean we are leaving, Kang said simply. All human personnel will evacuate council space within 30 days. We will no longer provide engineering support, diplomatic services, or peacekeeping forces. We will not maintain your stations or patrol your trade routes. We are done. Commander Yoon Tae-wook stood up in the human section. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. Our ships are already preparing to depart. All human colonies in council space will be evacuated. We will take nothing that belongs to the council, but we will leave nothing of ours behind. The aliens began talking all at once. The insect-like Korthax buzzed loudly. The Aquans sent streams of bubbles through their water tanks. The bird-like Scree whistled sharp alarm calls. But Regent Vexitar held up one crystal hand and the noise stopped. This is ridiculous, Vexitar said. You cannot just leave. Who will maintain the infrastructure? Who will handle the technical work? Kang almost smiled. That is your problem now, Regent, but you are just maintenance workers, Vexitar sputtered. Any species can do maintenance work. We do not need humans specifically. Dr. Park stood up slowly. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but when she spoke, her voice cut through the air like a blade. Maintenance workers? Is that what you think we are? She looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Do any of you know how a quantum stabilizer works? Can any of you explain why the hyperspace lanes stay open? Do you understand how we keep 47 different species from poisoning each other with incompatible atmosphere systems? The chamber was quiet again. Dr. Park continued. For 300 years, humans have been solving problems you did not even know existed. We have prevented disasters you never saw coming. We have fixed systems that other species built wrong from the beginning. Now you will learn to do it yourselves, Kang said, or you will not. That choice is yours. He closed his briefcase and walked toward the exit. Commander Yoon and Dr. Park followed him. The other human representatives gathered their things and left their seats empty. Regent Vextar called after them. "Where will you go? What will you do?" Kang paused at the door and looked back. "That is not your concern anymore." Within hours, human ships began leaving Council space. They moved quietly and efficiently, just as they had done everything else. There were no angry speeches or dramatic gestures. No threats or demands. The humans simply packed their things and left. On space stations across the galaxy, human engineers handed over their tools to alien replacements. They showed them where the important controls were and gave them instruction manuals. Most of the aliens seemed confident they could handle the work. After all, how hard could it be? Dr. Park stood on the observation deck of the human transport ship as it pulled away from Nexus Prime. She watched the massive council station grow smaller in the distance. "They have no idea what they just lost," she said quietly. Commander Yoon stood beside her. "They will learn." Behind them, Ambassador Kang sat in his cabin, writing his final report. He had tried for 30 years to earn respect for humanity in the Council. He had hoped that their good work would speak for itself. But some lessons could only be learned the hard way. The human ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the galaxy behind. In the Council chamber, Regent Vexitar was already making plans to redistribute human territories. It would be easy, he thought. Humans were replaceable. He had no idea how wrong he was. 6 months after the humans left, Chief Engineer Crothan stared at his data screen in growing panic. The insect-like being's forearms moved quickly across multiple control panels, but nothing he did seemed to help. Red warning lights flashed across the main engineering deck of Station Omega-7. "Status report," Crothan clicked in his species language. His assistant, a young Korthax named Velik, buzzed nervously. "The quantum stabilizers are failing again, Chief. This is the 3rd time this week." Crothan's compound eyes reflected the red warning lights. When the humans ran this station, the stabilizers never failed. In fact, he could not remember them ever needing repair. The humans had maintained them somehow, but they had never explained exactly how. "Run the repair sequence the humans left us," Crothan ordered. Velik's mandibles clicked together. "We already tried that, Chief. It does not work. The stabilizer keeps overheating." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of stations. The humans had left detailed instruction manuals for everything. They had trained replacement crews. They had been very careful to ensure that all systems were working when they departed. But somehow, things kept breaking anyway. On the trade world of Nexar 4, Commissioner Noxall floated in his water tank, watching the chaos outside his window. The aquatic being's tentacles twitched with stress as he read the latest shipping reports. 3 merchant fleets had been attacked by pirates in the last week. 2 trade routes had been shut down due to technical difficulties. The economy was starting to shake. Before the humans left, pirate attacks were rare. The human patrol fleets had kept the shipping lanes safe. But the Council had decided that any species could handle simple patrol duties. They had given the job to the Zephyrian military, a proud warrior race that loved to fight. The problem was that the Zephyrians only knew how to fight big battles. They did not understand the careful, patient work of anti-piracy patrol. They flew their ships in straight lines and announced their presence with loud radio broadcasts. The pirates simply waited for them to pass, then attacked the merchant ships. Noxall pressed a button on his communication panel. "Get me Admiral Zethkor of the Zephyrian fleet." The blue-skinned warrior appeared on the screen a few minutes later. His face was scarred from many battles and his eyes glowed with inner fire. "Commissioner, I hope you have good news about more ships for my fleet." "Admiral, the merchant losses are getting worse," Noxall bubbled. 3 more ships were destroyed yesterday. "The trade guilds are threatening to stop all shipments," Admiral Zethkor growled. "My warriors are doing their best. But these pirates are cowards. They run away when we arrive." "Maybe that is the problem," Noxall said carefully. "The humans used to patrol differently. They were quieter. The Admiral's eyes flashed. "A Zephyrian warrior does not hide. We announce our presence with pride." After the communication ended, Noxall sank deeper into his tank. He remembered Captain Lee Dong-hyun, the human who had coordinated anti-piracy efforts for 20 years. Lee had been a small, quiet man who spoke softly and smiled often. He had never talked about glory or honor. He had just kept the trade route safe. The humans had used small, fast ships that pirates could not detect easily. They had studied pirate patterns and predicted where attacks would happen. They had worked with merchant captains to develop safer routes. It had looked simple, but it was actually very complex. Now the pirates were getting bolder. They had better weapons and faster ships. Some people whispered that they were being supplied by enemy governments, but no one could prove it. The Zephyrians were too busy fighting to investigate. On the manufacturing world of Kepler 9, the problems were different, but just as serious. The massive factories that produced most of the galaxy's computer chips were breaking down. Supervisor Thyssera, a reptilian being with excellent organizational skills, walked through Factory Complex 7 with growing concern. When did this machine last have maintenance? She hissed at the floor supervisor. The supervisor, a nervous Korthax, checked his data pad. According to the records, it was maintained 2 days ago. But it keeps producing defective chips. Thyssera examined the machine carefully. It looked fine on the outside. All the controls were in the right positions. The diagnostic program said everything was normal, but 30% of the chips it produced did not work properly. She pulled up the maintenance records on her tablet. Dr. Lim Hei-wan had been the chief engineer for this complex for 15 years. Her records showed that she had performed routine maintenance on this machine every few days. But the records did not explain what she actually did. Did Dr. Lim leave any special instructions? Thyssera asked. The supervisor's antennae drooped. She left a manual, but it just says to check the calibration settings. We have done that many times. Thyssera sighed. She was beginning to understand that human routine maintenance had been anything but routine. The humans had some way of keeping machines running that other species did not understand. They had made it look easy, but it was actually incredibly difficult. The defective computer chips were causing problems throughout the galaxy. Ships could not navigate properly. Space stations had computer failures. Even simple household devices stopped working. The Council had ordered other factories to increase production, but they were having the same problems. In the Council chambers on Nexus Prime, Regent Vextar tried to look calm as he read the latest reports. His crystal body flickered between orange and red as his stress levels rose. The problems were spreading faster than anyone had expected. Surely these are just temporary difficulties, he said to his advisors. The replacement crews will learn quickly. Advisor Quintel, an ancient being whose species had been part of the Council for thousands of years, shook his head slowly. I am not so sure, Regent. I have been reading the old records. The humans were involved in far more things than we realized. Vextar's body flashed bright red. They were maintenance workers. How difficult can maintenance be? Quintel pulled up a holographic display showing Council activities over the past 50 years. Look at this data, Regent. Every major crisis that was resolved quickly had human involvement. Every technical problem that was solved elegantly had human engineers working on it. Every diplomatic success had human mediators in the background. The hologram showed thousands of incidents, asteroid impacts that were prevented, disease outbreaks that were stopped, trade disputes that were settled, system failures that were fixed. In every case, humans had been involved. But they never asked for credit, Quintel continued. They just did the work and let other species take the praise. Vextar stared at the data. He had always thought the humans were just helpful assistants. He had never realized how much they actually did. This cannot be accurate. I'm afraid it is, Quintel said sadly. We have made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to admit mistakes. The humans were gone and they had not left any way to contact them. The galaxy was starting to fall apart and no one knew how to fix it. On a small research station near the Galactic Rim, the last human outpost was preparing to shut down. Dr. Kim So-young, a conflict resolution specialist, was packing up 30 years of research data. She had studied every major war and diplomatic crisis in recent galactic history. Her research showed a pattern that no one else had noticed. When humans were involved in peace negotiations, agreements lasted an average of 47 years. When other species handled negotiations alone, agreements lasted an average of 6 years. The humans had a gift for understanding what different species really wanted, not just what they said they wanted. They could find solutions that made everyone happy, even when the problem seemed impossible to solve. Dr. Kim sealed her research files and prepared to join the last human transport ship. She wondered if the galaxy would learn to solve its own problems or if it would tear itself apart. As her ship jumped to hyperspace, the station's lights went dark forever. 1 year after humanity's departure, Emergency Coordinator Veloth floated in the Crisis Command Center, all 6 of his tentacles working different control panels at once. The jellyfish-like being had been pulled out of retirement to handle what the Council was calling temporary adjustment difficulties. But Veloth knew this was no temporary problem. Report from Sector 7, one of his assistants announced. The Korthax and Zephyrian fleets are shooting at each other again. Veloth's body pulsed with stress colors. What started it this time? Something about mining rights to an asteroid field. Both sides claim the humans promised it to them 50 years ago. Veloth sighed, sending bubbles through the water that surrounded his floating body. Without human mediators, old disputes were coming back to life like diseases. Every week another conflict started. Every month another trade route closed. Every day more systems went dark. Send a diplomatic team, Veloth ordered, knowing it would probably fail. The non-human diplomats were skilled, but they could not work the same magic that humans had somehow performed. They followed all the right procedures and said all the right words, but somehow, wars kept starting anyway. On the battle bridge of the Zephyrian warship, Fire of Victory, Admiral Zephyr studied the tactical display with growing frustration. His blue skin was darker than usual, a sign of deep anger among his people. 3 of his best captains had died in the last month, killed in battles that should have been easy victories. Admiral, his communication officer reported, "The Korthax fleet is requesting another ceasefire negotiation." Zephyr growled low in his throat. "Tell them to surrender completely, or we continue fighting." His tactical advisor, a younger warrior named Korek, stepped forward nervously. "Admiral, perhaps we should consider their offer. Our losses have been significant." Zephyr spun around, his eyes blazing. "Significant? We are Zephyrians. We do not lose battles to insects." But they were losing. The Korthax had always been excellent at building things, but no one had realized they were also clever at breaking things. Their small, fast ships hit Zephyrian vessels and disappeared before the heavier weapons could respond. They used tactics that Zephyr had never seen before. What the Admiral did not know was that for decades, human military advisors had been quietly helping both sides avoid serious conflicts. Captain Cho Min-woo had served as a liaison officer with the Zephyrian fleet for 10 years. He had taught them about coordination and strategy. He had helped them work with other species' fleets. More importantly, Captain Cho had also worked with the Korthax military, teaching them how to defend themselves without starting wars. He had shown both sides how to compete without killing each other. His reports, buried deep in military archives, detailed hundreds of small interventions that had prevented major conflicts. Now, without human guidance, both species were fighting the way their instincts told them to fight. The Zephyrians attacked with overwhelming force. The Korthax responded with clever ambushes. Neither side remembered how to stop before things went too far. In the archive chambers beneath the council building, Keeper Thysera was making disturbing discoveries. The reptilian scholar had been researching human contributions to galactic civilization, trying to understand why everything was falling apart so quickly. "Computer, show me all records of human involvement in infrastructure maintenance," she hissed into her voice recorder. The holographic display filled with data, thousands of files, millions of maintenance reports, decades of engineering logs. As Thysera read through them, a terrible picture emerged. The humans had not just maintained existing systems. They had constantly improved them. Every time they fixed something, they actually made it better. Every time they performed routine maintenance, they solved problems that other species had not even noticed. Engineer Nam Ki-jun's personal logs were particularly revealing. He had worked on power systems for 43 different space stations. His logs showed that he had prevented over 200 critical failures that would have killed thousands of people. His colleagues had never known about these near disasters because Nam had fixed the problems before anyone else detected them. "We never asked them what they were really doing," Thysera whispered to herself. "We just assumed they were following our instructions." The truth was that human engineers had been rewriting those instructions constantly. They had taken badly designed alien systems and made them work through countless small improvements. They had solved fundamental design flaws that the original builders had never recognized. Now, without constant human maintenance, those design flaws were becoming critical failures. Power systems overloaded. Life support systems broke down. Navigation computers gave wrong directions. The galaxy's infrastructure was collapsing because it had never been built properly in the first place. On the trade world of Nexar 4, Commissioner Noxal watched his civilization crumble from his office window. 3 more shipping companies had gone out of business this week. The Merchant Guild was demanding military protection that the Council could not provide. Pirates controlled 5 major trade routes and their attacks were getting bolder. The Aquatic being pulled up an old file on his computer. Anti-Piracy Strategy Report by Captain Lee Dong-hyun. He had never bothered to read it carefully before. The humans had just handled piracy, and it had not been his problem. Now he studied every page. Captain Lee's strategy was incredibly complex. It involved economic analysis, psychological profiling, and careful coordination between dozens of different agencies. The humans had not just fought pirates. They had studied them like scientists. Captain Lee had identified the economic conditions that created piracy. He had tracked the supply chains that provided pirates with weapons. He had even worked with planetary governments to create jobs for people who might otherwise become pirates. We thought he was just a ship captain. Noxal bubbled sadly. He was an economist, a psychologist, and a social engineer. The current anti-piracy efforts were failing because they only addressed the symptoms, not the causes. The Zephyrian warriors attacked pirate ships when they found them, but they did not understand why pirates existed in the first place. For every pirate ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared. Without the complex web of economic and social programs that humans had quietly maintained, piracy was becoming attractive to more and more desperate people. Unemployment was rising as trade routes failed. Planetary governments were cutting services as tax revenues dropped. Young people with no hope were joining pirate crews. In the council chambers, Regent Vextar faced his worst nightmare, a galaxy-wide economic collapse. His crystal body had turned a dull black, the color his species showed when facing complete disaster. "How many systems have gone dark this week?" he asked his aide. 17, Regent. Most of them are having power failures or life support problems. Vextar reviewed the evacuation requests piling up on his desk. Entire planets were asking to be relocated because their infrastructure was failing. Space stations were being abandoned as their systems broke down. Colonies that had thrived for centuries were becoming uninhabitable. "What about the teams we sent to study human facilities?" Vextar asked. His aide's expression was grim. "They found the facilities, Regent, but they were already shut down. The humans removed all the critical components before they left. They left us the buildings, but not the knowledge." It was becoming clear that the humans had planned their departure very carefully. They had removed their expertise without destroying anything important immediately. They had given the galaxy time to find replacements, but they had not made it easy. The replacement teams were learning that human, simple procedures were actually incredibly sophisticated. What looked like basic maintenance required deep understanding of physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering. The humans had made it look easy because they were extremely skilled, not because the work was actually simple. "Regent," his aide continued, "there is something else. We have been monitoring communications from the Outer Rim. Some of the smaller species are starting to form their own alliances. They are not waiting for us to solve these problems." Vextar's crystal body flashed red with anger, then faded to resignation gray. The Galactic Council was losing its authority as its ability to provide services disappeared. Species were starting to take care of themselves, and they were not asking permission. On a small cargo ship fleeing the chaos, Captain An Seo-jun watched the galaxy burn from a safe distance. The human officer had volunteered to stay behind and observe what happened after humanity's departure. His ship was equipped with long-range sensors that could monitor Council space without being detected. His reports were sent back to the main human fleet through encrypted hyperspace relays. The human leadership wanted to know if their former colleagues would learn from this experience, or if they would destroy themselves completely. So far, the results were mixed. Some species were showing remarkable adaptability. The Aquans had developed new underwater cities that did not depend on Council infrastructure. The Korthax were building self-sufficient hive colonies that could survive on their own. But many other species were struggling badly. The proud Zephyrians were tearing themselves apart in pointless wars. 2 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy was desperate. In the emergency session of what remained of the Galactic Council, Search Coordinator Quintel stood before the scattered representatives of only 23 species. The others had either fallen into civil war, lost contact, or simply stopped sending delegates. The ancient being's skin was pale with exhaustion. Quintel's species lived for thousands of years, and he had seen many crises, but nothing like this. His voice was steady but tired as he addressed the assembly. "The search mission is ready to launch," he announced. "We have assembled the largest fleet in Council history. 100 ships will search every system where humans might have gone." Regent Vexitar, his crystal body now permanently dim gray, leaned forward. "What are our chances of finding them?" Quintel hesitated. "Unknown, Regent. The humans were very careful to hide their destination. We have found no hyperspace trail to follow. They seem to have disappeared completely." Captain Mordex of the Zephyrian Space Fleet stood up from his seat. The scarred warrior was one of the few military officers still loyal to the Council. Most others had returned home to fight in local wars. "My scouts have checked over 300 systems," Mordex reported. "We found abandoned human colonies, empty space stations, and derelict ships. But no active human settlements. It is as if they never existed." The search had been going on for months. Every species contributed ships and personnel, hoping to find the humans and convince them to return. They had checked every system that humans had ever visited. They had followed every trade route that human ships had used. They had investigated every rumor and report, but the humans had vanished completely. They had left behind empty buildings and inactive equipment, but no clues about where they had gone. Even their garbage dumps had been cleaned out. Even their communication networks had been shut down and dismantled. On the research vessel, Last Hope, archive keeper Thyssera was studying the most detailed records of human activity she could find. The reptilian scholar had discovered something that shocked her. The humans had been preparing to leave for over 50 years. "Computer, show me all instances of humans requesting copies of technical manuals," she hissed. The holographic display filled with data. Starting about 60 years ago, humans had begun asking for copies of every technical manual, every scientific paper, every piece of information in the Council archives. They had claimed it was for educational purposes and cross-training programs. But Thyssera could see the real pattern. The humans had been secretly copying all of galactic civilization's knowledge. They had learned how to build and maintain everything without depending on alien expertise. "Show me human resource allocation over the same period," she commanded. Another shocking pattern emerged. While working for the Council, humans had been quietly stockpiling resources. They had mined extra metals, produced extra equipment, and stored extra supplies. They had always reported these activities as efficiency improvements or reserve building. The truth was that humans had been building their own infrastructure in secret. They had created hidden manufacturing bases, secret research facilities, and private communication networks. While serving the Council, they had been preparing for independence. Engineer Nam Ki-jun's personal logs were the most revealing. The human engineer had worked on 43 space stations, but his logs showed that he had also designed and built 12 complete stations of human design. These secret stations had been hidden in remote systems far from Council space. "We never asked where they went during their vacation time," Thyssera realized. "We never wondered why they needed so many training exercises in empty systems." The humans had spent decades building a complete civilization parallel to the Council's. They had their own ships, their own technology, and their own colonies. When they left Council space, they had simply moved to their secret empire. Captain Mordex was discovering this the hard way. His scouts had found traces of human activity in dozens of systems that were supposedly uninhabited. Old mining operations, abandoned research stations, and the remains of construction projects. But all of these sites had been carefully cleaned up before the humans left. "They were building something," Mordex reported to the search fleet. "Something big. But they took it all with them when they left." The search teams found evidence of massive construction projects, empty asteroid fields where millions of tons of metal had been mined, barren moons where research facilities had been dismantled down to the foundation, space where entire fleets had been built and then taken away. "How did they hide all this from us?" one of his officers asked. Mordex stared at the sensor readings. because we never looked. We thought they were just maintenance workers. We never imagined they had their own agenda. On the edge of Council space, the search fleet found their most important discovery, a small listening post that the humans had abandoned only recently. The station was empty, but its computer system still contained some data. Quintel led the investigation team personally. The ancient being examined every piece of equipment with growing amazement. The human technology was decades ahead of anything the Council had. Their computers were faster, their sensors were more accurate, and their power systems were incredibly efficient. "Look at this," one of the technicians called out. He was a young Aquan who specialized in computer systems. The humans were monitoring all of our communications. They knew everything we were doing. The listening post had been recording Council activities for over 30 years. The humans had been watching their former colleagues, learning about their problems and probably laughing at their failures. But more importantly, the computer files showed where the humans had gone. They had traveled beyond the edge of the galaxy, into the dark space between galaxies. They had found something out there, something that no Council species had ever explored. "The void between galaxies," Quintel whispered. "They went where we cannot follow. The intergalactic void was too dangerous for Council ships. The distances were too great, the radiation too intense, and the resources required too massive. Only humans with their advanced technology and careful planning could have made such a journey." Quintel accessed the final files on the human computer system. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about humanity. The files contained detailed analyses of every Council species. The humans had studied their colleagues for centuries, learning their strengths and weaknesses, their needs and fears, their capabilities and limitations. But these were not the files of servants or employees. These were the files of teachers evaluating their students. Dr. Park Soo-jin's research notes were particularly revealing. The human scientist had spent 40 years studying alien psychology and society. Her conclusions were devastating. Most Council species have become dependent on external solutions to their problems. They have lost the ability to innovate or adapt independently. They expect others to solve their difficulties and provide for their needs. Without constant guidance and support, many species will regress or collapse. But there was hope in the files as well. Dr. Park had identified species that showed potential for growth and independence. The Aquans were developing new technologies. Some Korthax colonies were becoming self-sufficient. A few smaller species were learning to cooperate without Council supervision. "The galaxy is not doomed," Dr. Park had written, "but it must learn to grow up. Some species will adapt and thrive. Others will not survive the transition. This is natural and necessary." Captain Mordex found another set of files that made his warrior's heart burn with shame. These contained detailed reports on military cooperation between species. The files showed that humans had been the invisible coordinators of every successful joint military operation in the past century. When Zephyrian and Korthax fleets had worked together to stop pirate raids, humans had been the translators and coordinators. When Aquan and crystalline forces had cooperated to defend trade routes, humans had been the communication specialists. When multiple species had combined their forces for peacekeeping missions, humans had been the tactical advisors. "We thought we were great warriors," Mordex said to his officers, "but we were just following human guidance without knowing it." The military files showed that most alien species could not effectively cooperate with each other without human mediation. Their communication styles were too different, their tactical thinking too alien, their goals too conflicted. Humans had somehow bridged these gaps and made cooperation possible. Now, without human coordination, military alliances were falling apart. Species that had been allies for decades were becoming enemies. The great peacekeeping fleets had dissolved into competing factions. The galaxy was preparing for wars that humans had prevented for centuries. Quintel made the hardest decision of his long life. He ordered the search fleet to return to Council space. The humans were beyond reach, and the galaxy needed to focus on surviving without them. "We will not find them," he announced to the fleet, "and perhaps that is for the best. They have given us a chance to learn independence. We must take that chance or perish." As the ships turned back toward home, Captain Mordex took one last look at the void between galaxies. Somewhere out there, humanity was building a new civilization. 5 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy looked like a different place. Former Regent Vextar walked through the empty corridors of the Council building on Nexus Prime. his crystal body dim and cracked with age. The massive structure that had once housed representatives from 47 species now echoed with emptiness. Most of the offices were dark. The great assembly hall sat silent, its thousands of seats covered in dust. The communication centers that had once buzzed with messages from across the galaxy received only static. The Galactic Council, as an organization, had simply stopped functioning. Vextar paused at the memorial wall that someone had installed near the main entrance. Carved into black stone were the names of species that no longer existed. The crystalline collective had shattered when their energy networks failed completely. The Zephyrian Empire had torn itself apart in civil wars. 3 smaller species had simply vanished, their worlds gone dark and silent. But the memorial also listed species that had survived and even thrived. The Aquans had built new underwater cities and developed amazing new technologies. Some Korthax colonies had created self-sufficient societies that worked better than anything the Council had ever managed. A few groups of mixed species had formed small federations that solved their own problems without outside help. It could have been different, Vextar whispered to the empty hall. He remembered the day Ambassador Kang had announced humanity's departure. Vextar had been so confident that humans were easily replaceable. He had seen them as useful servants, nothing more. He had never imagined that they were the foundation holding galactic civilization together. On the farming world of Kepler-12, colony leader Tekron supervised the evening meal in the community dining hall. The insect-like being watched over 300 residents representing 12 different species. They had learned to live together out of necessity, and somehow, it worked. The water recycling system is running perfectly, reported Engineer Kolat, a young Aquan who had designed the settlement's infrastructure, and the crop yields are up 15% from last season. Tekron's antennae twitched with satisfaction. This small colony was proof that different species could cooperate without human guidance. It had taken them 3 years of mistakes and failures, but they had finally learned to work together. "Tell me again about the old days," asked Yenara, a child of mixed Korthax and Aquan heritage. Such mixed families had been rare during the Council era, but they were becoming more common in the independent colonies. Tekron settled into his storytelling posture. Long ago, there was a great empire that spanned the entire galaxy. Thousands of worlds were connected by vast ships that traveled between the stars, but the empire depended on a special people called humans. The children gathered around as they did every evening. This story had become a legend, told in different ways across the surviving colonies. The humans were the fixers, Tekron continued. When machines broke, humans repaired them. When people fought, humans helped them make peace. When problems seemed impossible, humans found solutions. "What did they look like?" asked Nexel, a crystalline child whose parents had fled their homeworld before it fell. "They were small and soft, with only 2 arms and 2 eyes, Tekron said. But their minds were clever and their hearts were kind. They worked very hard and never asked for much in return." "Why did they leave?" Yenara asked, even though she knew the answer. "Because the Empire took them for granted," Tekron said sadly. "The leaders thought humans were just servants. They never realized that humans were actually the teachers, showing everyone else how to live together in peace." The children had heard this story many times, but they never got tired of it. In the new galaxy, humans had become mythical figures remembered for their wisdom and kindness. Parents told their children to work hard like humans, to be clever like humans, to help others like humans. On the observation ship Silent Watcher, Captain An Seo-jun reviewed his final report after 5 years of monitoring galactic affairs. The human officer had watched civilizations rise and fall, species adapt or disappear, and slowly, painfully, a new order emerged from the chaos. "Final assessment," he dictated to his computer. "The former council species have experienced massive population losses and territorial contractions. However, survivors are showing remarkable adaptation and innovation. Several new interspecies alliances have formed that appear stable and self-sufficient." He paused to look at the detailed charts covering his cabin walls. Red zones marked areas where civilization had completely collapsed. Yellow zones showed struggling colonies barely surviving, but green zones marked successful settlements where multiple species had learned to work together. Recommendation: continue monitoring for 2 more years. then establish limited contact with the most successful colonies. Some species have clearly learned the lessons of independence and cooperation. They may be ready for renewed friendship but not dependence. The human fleet in Andromeda had built amazing new worlds during their exile. They had developed technologies that made their old council equipment look primitive. They had created art and literature inspired by their journey to a new galaxy. They had grown as a species during their time away, but many humans missed their old friends. They had fond memories of working alongside aliens, solving problems together, and building something greater than any one species could achieve alone. The question was whether the galaxy had learned enough to try again. In the ruins of the Great Library on Nexus Prime, a small group of survivors worked to preserve what remained of galactic knowledge. The Watcher, as he called himself, was a being of unknown species who appeared to be very old and very wise. Some said he had been there since before the council was formed. "Master Watcher?" asked his assistant, a young Korthax scholar named Dixara. "Do you think the humans will ever return?" The Watcher looked up from the ancient data crystals he was cataloging. His face was hidden behind a mask and his voice was soft and mysterious. "They never truly left, child. Their influence remains in every lesson we have learned, every problem we have solved, every peace we have made. But I mean really return," Dixara pressed. "With their ships and their technology and their solutions to our problems," the Watcher chuckled softly. "That would defeat the purpose of their departure. They left so we would learn to solve our own problems. If they returned to fix everything for us, we would learn nothing." He gestured to the vast library around them, its shelves now mostly empty. "The humans gave us the greatest gift possible, the necessity of growing up. Some of us have accepted that gift. Others have not. What about the species that did not survive?" Dixara asked sadly. The Watcher was quiet for a long moment. "Growth is often painful, and not everyone survives the process. The humans knew this when they left. They did not abandon us cruelly. They gave us the chance to become what we could become. And what have we become?" The Watcher pointed to a data crystal containing reports from the surviving colonies. "Some of us have become wise. Some have become strong. Some have become independent. And some have learned to work together without needing a parent species to guide us." In the main corridor of the abandoned council building, someone had placed a small plaque near the entrance. It was made of simple metal and bore words in the common galactic language. "In memory of those we failed to value until they were gone. May we learn from our mistakes and prove worthy of their faith in us." No one knew who had placed the plaque there, but no one had removed it either. Visitors to the empty building often stopped to read it and think about the choices that had led to this moment. On distant worlds, new stories were being written. The Aquan underwater cities had developed art forms that no one had ever imagined. The surviving Korthax hives had created music that could make other species weep with beauty. The mixed colonies had invented new ways of living that solved problems the old council had never been able to handle. The galaxy was smaller now, but it was also more diverse. Without a central authority forcing conformity, each species and colony had developed its own unique culture. Trade was more difficult, but it was also more interesting. Communication was more challenging, but it was also more meaningful. Some groups had learned to live without advanced technology, developing sustainable ways of life that could survive any disaster. Others had pushed technology forward in new directions, creating innovations that even the humans had never thought of. Still others had found the perfect balance between nature and machine, tradition and progress. Captain An received his orders from the Human Fleet Command. "Begin preparation for limited recontact. Select the most promising colonies for initial diplomatic outreach. Humanity is ready to offer friendship and trade, but not dependence. We are no longer willing to be the galaxy's caretakers." As he prepared to send his final report and begin the long journey home, Captain An looked one last time at the galaxy that humanity had left behind. It was broken in many places, but it was also healing. It was smaller than before, but it was also stronger. The humans had gambled that their former colleagues could learn to stand alone. Some had failed that test, but others had passed it brilliantly. The new galaxy might not be as grand as the old Council Empire, but it was more honest.